Welcome to the Healthy Love and Money podcast. If you find money to be the number 1, 2, or even third largest source of stress in your relationship, then you're in the right place. Going beyond how to budget, invest, and do your taxes, we're going to explore financial intimacy. Discover how to talk with your partner about your shared financial life. Let's take the awkward and painful out of money conversations. Join me and hit follow to listen to weekly inspiring, healing, and motivating interviews with financial therapists, couples therapists, and financial planners, and so many more. Let's go on the journey of financial intimacy together. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Healthy Love and Money podcast. Today, it's my distinct honor to welcome back Derek Hagan to the show. Now, Derek, in the first part of the show, was sharing a big part of his life, his journey to doing money work with clients. And that's a big kind of general title, but Derek's accumulated so much knowledge and perspective about how people relate to and experience money. And today in this episode, we're going to move from his story more into working with clients, what he's seen, how he approaches it, so that you can draw on those lessons for your own life. Derek, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Absolutely. So before we hit record, you were sharing that you had this experience in your broader family around brain surgery, and it blew your mind. Can you tell listeners a little bit about what you learned about brain surgery?
Yeah, I can. And admittedly, before last week, I knew very little about this. So that's just the caveat that I have to share. Because in my head, the story that I tell myself is brain surgery means I've seen the TV show House. I've seen medical TV shows. So they cut open your skull and they pull out your skull and they put it somewhere and they dig into your brain and do whatever they got to do. And then they put the skull back up. This seems very painful. I even remember cringing when I would watch the TV shows. Oh man, I can even feel it.
Yeah.
It feels like that would be very painful. So a close family member of mine needed to have brain surgery done to help with some seizures that were happening. And I first went back to this uncomfortable image of, oh man, they're going to have to do this whole invasive thing. I found out I live in Minnesota, about an hour and a half from Rochester, which is where the Mayo Clinic is. And this is a pretty big hospital on the cutting edge of medical technology and things. So this family member goes down there and she gets brain surgery. But brain surgery doesn't mean removing half of the head and digging into the brain. It was 3 tiny little holes that they inserted some kind of a wire or some kind of a thing. A wire in my head is a wire. Again, I don't know the medical term.
I don't think anybody listening is going to be like, no, Derek, it's not a wire. It's actually this. If you're the neurosurgeon that does this thing, send me an email, let us know. But it's skinny. It's probably a little bendy, flexible, but it can get into the nooks and crannies of the brain.
And presumably they're using some kind of computer technology to go into exactly where they need to go. Completely opposite from how I thought it was going to be. Last week was a realization, always learning. This is a situation where, and we see this, Ed and I and others see this in clients all the time. It was when I sometimes call them aha moments, right? Epiphany moment where, oh, that's how they do that. Sometimes we do this with ourselves. Oh, that's why I do that. Right. But it happens everywhere. You're like, oh, that's completely different than the story I was telling myself.
Yes.
So it's just super interesting to hear how they do it compared to how it's done.
Yes. And I think that's what's so interesting about our work is in the world of financial therapy and financial psychology. I think most of the time we're working with people's minds, but the mind comes from the brain and the body. And so just this idea of like, we're all actually working with people's brains when we're doing the money psychology, money therapy type of work, and your perspective shifting on, oh, how do we access that? And oh, that's cool that you can go straight into that and surgically do something to, in this case, alleviate maybe hopefully seizure symptoms. What we were connecting this to is people were actually often coming to us and saying, fix me. And like from a surgical lens, like we could somehow go into their experience and who they are and like cut out fill in the blank X bad experience around money, remove it, stitch it up, back close together, and then off you go. But that's not how our work actually goes, is it?
No, it would be easy if that were the case.
I often, sometimes I'll be honest, I'm jealous of my wife. She's a dentist. She goes in, she surgically takes care of the tooth, rebuilds it, and it's done. And they leave and they're smiling 2 or 3 hours later. Man, that is brilliant. I love that you can do that. I have someone come and see me for an hour. We talk through some things. It seems like their psychological distress has come down some. And then we meet again next week or 2 weeks later. And well, there's this other thing that's really got me feeling overwhelmed actually also. Okay, well, let's talk about and work through that and figure out what to do. Okay, then we come back next week. And it's a process. It takes a lot of repetition and time, but we can't just undo those regrettable experiences, right? I often have clients that are lamenting over, oh, I wish I wouldn't have got myself so far into debt. I just don't know what to do. Help me. And it's this kind of the hero in me wants to jump in, save the day, and magically cut out the debt and gone. Sew you up together, on the road you go. But it takes more work than that. So anyhow, Derek, this is all right, listeners, true confessions, right? This is the sign that Derek is such a good listener. He's the guest. I should be asking him questions, but he's just sitting here patiently listening to Ed. Okay, where's he going with this? I'll just wait for him. Let me turn the show back to you, Derek. Ask you some questions.
Sure.
So you were sharing, we're reflecting on this family member, the brain surgery, and then thinking about clients that you've worked with and them asking you to fix them. And you were sharing a really intriguing story about someone you got to work with. Can you tell us a little bit about their journey and how that relates to the work that you do?
Yeah, and related to what you were just saying, this temptation to say, "And fix me," or "Derek,
Yeah.
fix me." I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I don't think that there's an answer yet, and maybe there never will be, but there's this idea of treating psychology or treating our minds as if it was a medical model, as if there's my computer broke, so I bring it into the repair person and they fix it.
Right.
So I'm broken, please fix me. And I think, and it just is just my personal belief, I think that's why there's a lot of stigma around the word therapy or even the profession of therapy is, well, if I need therapy, that means I'm broken, but I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. Therefore, I don't need therapy. So I think that's why some people think that there's this taboo. And you can even hear it in people's voice. You need therapy. Somebody might say in an argument or something like that. So I think that's changing. And I think we're in the middle of that changing, but those old stories still exist. Nonetheless, I was working with who wanted that quote unquote medical model that I'm broken, fix me.
Right.
And it was challenging because first of all, there is no, what does it mean to fix you? To be able to fix somebody means to get you to what? What does it mean to be, what does it mean to be psychologically healthy? And if you ask me and you ask Ed and you ask somebody you just meet over at the mall, we're going to have 3 different answers. So how could you fix somebody? So it was interesting because we'll call him Matt. Matt comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm spending through my money too quickly. Help me stop spending the money." And so we went through kind of some of the things that I do. Let's walk through, what story are you telling yourself around why you think you need to spend this? What are your values? And then are your behaviors supporting those values? If they are, maybe you've chosen the wrong values. They might be what I call extrinsic values, or that just means values that he thinks he's supposed to have or that come from outside of him. Let's do some work around finding what's actually important to him. And then seeing is that, are those good values? So, for example, this man, we found out that being liked, being respected was very important to him.
Yeah.
And there's lots of reasons for this, childhood things, parents weren't there, got made fun of on the playground and things like that. So now here's a position where I've got some money that I can buy love, or I can buy respect, or I can buy whatever it is to fill my soul with whatever was missing. Problem, of course, is that Matt only made X salary, but he was spending nearly X times 2 to live his life. And so therefore it's draining.
So we'll just put some numbers on it. Let's say he's making 150,000, but he's spending $300,000 a year.
Yep. Yep.
right? We're
Exactly.
making these numbers up to protect Matt's identity, but just so
Right.
for those of us that are more concrete, it's like he's making 150, he's spending 300. This is, and that's
Yeah.
okay. All right.
And he inherited or was given, basically inherited,
Yeah.
say $10 million, and he would make up that 150,000 deficit. That just means he's spending 150 more than he makes. He's
Yeah.
making up that by taking money out of savings. And so Matt had a really good time in his 20s, and he had a lot of friends. And if you're just
Yeah.
listening, I'm using friends in air quotes
Whoops.
because
Right.
if the money went away, would he still have those friends? We don't know because we can't, no counterfactual to compare this to. But most would say he probably didn't have friends if he didn't have the money. So then by the time he comes to see me, Matt has less than $1 million of his $10 million left.
Okay. Yeah.
It took him that long to reach out. I shouldn't say it took him that long to realize he has a problem, but it took him that long to reach out to somebody. And his whole demeanor was, fix me. Just, can you help me erase my memory of my past? Because I had a great time spending all that money in my 20s.
Yeah.
It was an amazing time. And I know, his words, I know that the best my life will ever be, or ever can be, has already happened. It means my life is always going to be worse than it has been.
Oh, because he's thinking like this money created such an incredible experience in my 20s, doing all these activities and having all these people around me. And I know I'll never have $10 million again in my life. So now there's this
Exactly.
profound loss and grief around my life is based on being able to create these incredible experiences that I use money to fuel. And now I have no money to do that.
Correct. Yeah.
Look,
So basically, there's stories that he's telling himself, schemas or scripts, or the story that he's telling himself is, one, it's never going to be as good. Two, it's never going to be as good because I can't spend like I used to. And so he's making the implicit assumption that the good life is only if you can spend money. So these are deeply rooted
yeah,
beliefs that aren't easily changed. I tried unsuccessfully to help Med talk through these beliefs, but he didn't want to, or I'll show him the blame here. I couldn't get him to see that these were beliefs and not a fact. And this is how I could tell if you challenge me and say it's not a belief, it's a fact, that's a really deep belief. So I couldn't get him to see that this was a belief and not. So he went out, he had a lot of therapists because he wanted somebody to do this proverbial fix me, which is to externalize, external locus of control, which basically means I don't want to take responsibility for this. I want somebody else. And so I don't have a good ending to this story because I couldn't help him. And so it wasn't worth his money to keep paying me. So we parted ways. But that's just an example of how, even though therapy might be taboo because I don't want to feel broken, there can still be times when we feel like just somebody needs to fix it. Because would that be easier? Then Ben said this earlier. Wouldn't it be easier if you could just tweak a couple of synapses and point them in different directions, and then the different brain chemicals will help me feel like I'm happy making 150 and spending 100, which is where would be better off, but it doesn't work that way.
Wow, Derek, this is such a powerful story. And I think it's representative of so many of the types of clients we end up working with. Let me be honest and say this represents me. Not that I've had $10 million I've brought down to 1 million, but that what I say is that expectation that money will give me respect, will give me status, and if I can relate to other people that have money, I've been on the other side of, why was I really friends with that person? Was it because I liked them intrinsically for who they were? Or was it because I liked the social status that they had and the money they could spend? And let's be very honest, it was more the latter than it was the former, right? And this is in my mind, part of the emotional maturity and emotional healing is to connect with people because of who they are intrinsically, not because of what they can do for you, not who they are. Am I friends with you because you have social status, or am I friends with you because I enjoy your company? Now, if I enjoy your company and have social status, maybe that's a double win, but that's this dance. And I think for many of us, when we're starting from more modest places, are looking at those with more resources, more status, more air quotes, status and respect, we're saying, oh, well, the solution is to have more success and status and money. Because look, they have people and they have notoriety and they look visible and they look appreciated. And I feel invisible. I don't feel worthy. So it's not a hard equation to figure out. If I feel insecure, if I feel unbroken and rejected, and those people look like they're respected, accepted, and loved. Oh, and the common denominator seems to be this status money thing. Get me some of that.
Love that.
Derek, the other thing that I thought about is, believe it or not, I studied how to treat sex addiction for a period of time. And that was an unruly experience, let me just tell you. But there are so many parallels to working with people that have struggled with sexual addiction, to people that have struggled with money issues. Because oftentimes there's insecurity, there's trauma, there's abandonment. There's this hope that if I hit this perfect sexual experience, I will be in bliss. I'll be in nirvana. I'll be finally one. And they go to more and more extreme lengths for their sexual expression, trying to get this satiation, this sense of worth. But it then starts to become, dare I say, more perverted, more exploitative, more problematic. I think it seems to me that there's a very similar pattern with money, that we look at sex and money in similar ways from that perspective. I'm just curious your thoughts as I lay this very unexpected curveball in your lap.
No, and I think I like that parallel, but and I also think, and I've always open to being wrong, so I don't allow my beliefs loosely, or at least I try to. But I almost think money might be worse because we can cover up, or we don't have to share, or what goes on in the bedroom. Maybe I can. There are, some people might, but money, even if I don't want to talk about money, I am signaling what I'm wearing. I'm wearing a blazer right now. That says something, whether I want it to or not. I drive a particular car.
Right.
It's an expensive car. I'm trying to, or it has some people will get the impression that I'm doing this. If I drive a 10-year-old car, it'll give some people the impression that I'm signaling whether I want to or not. And that's a little bit different from the sex angle, but I think at the core, I think that you're right. They both have similar roots there.
Right. And looked at from one vantage point, we can turn to sex and money to solve our insecurities.
Right. Yeah.
And in certain ways, sex and money can help alleviate certain insecurities, but they're not the total answer, right? If I'm turning to sex solely to make myself feel secure and valued, then I may never feel satiated. I may never have enough of it. And the sexual response system is such that, like, most of us want to have continued sexual experiences over most of our adult life, but it's eating and breathing. It's like there's levels of satiation, and then a period where I don't need it. And then there's a period where I need a little bit more. And there's cycles. Breathing is pretty regular. Eating is every 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on who you are. Sex, I'm not the expert in this, but it's relatively frequent for folks. It's not by the minute or the hour for most of us, I would think. Once a week, a couple times a week, I don't know. It's somewhere out there. Money, we need in regular doses as well to sustain life in modern society. If I run short, I'm not able to participate in activities that are meaningful to me. We're trying to figure out how to meet these needs that span across different sections.
Yeah. And I think this kind of goes back to something you said earlier, where it reminded me of we're in graduation season, and there was the late David Foster Wallace delivered an address to some graduates called "This Is Water." If you haven't heard this talk, it's well worth 25 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
In this, he talks about we are the center of our own universe, and this is egocentrism, which we tend to as society. That's a bad thing. You're being egocentric, but that just means the ego is at the center, egocentric. So we feel like everything is happening around us. So we know exactly what it's like to be us. I know what it's like to be embarrassed. I know what it's like to be afraid. I know what it's like to be nervous. I know what it's like to be happy. Your experience can only be communicated to me. I can't experience you experience. So even if you perfectly communicated it to me, I still can't experience you experience, which means I know exactly how much financial stress I'm under.
Right.
I can't know how much financial stress you're under. And then later on top of that, we don't normally go out talking about how stressed we are.
Yeah.
And then layering on top of that, many of us signal as though we're doing better than we actually are. So here I am. I know exactly how much stress I feel. And I look around and I see everybody else doesn't feel stress, or it looks like they're not. So this becomes a very simple argument. Like, I don't want to feel stressed. You don't look stressed. Therefore, I should do what you're doing. And so I think that's where the keeping up with the Joneses effect comes from. It's like, I'm seeing you seem to have it together. I don't know what's going on underneath the surface. I don't know that house that you have has 2 mortgages on it. I don't know you're behind on that car payment. Maybe you're up to date on your car payment, but you can't afford to go on vacation. I don't know any of that stuff. I only know what I see, and I know I'm stressed and you don't look stressed out. And so then it's easy to latch on to what other people seem to be doing.
Well, and I think about like brain efficiency and decision making, like simple heuristics is I think a technical word, but it's like heuristics being about decision making. And we're trying to use simple information to make sense of complex presentations, right? So I'm looking at Derek's environment, and my brain, if I allow it, can make some evaluation of how much money Derek has. I don't actually know how much money Derek has unless I ask him. I also don't, if he tells me a number, I don't necessarily know how Derek feels about that number, because you will have your own feelings about your number, whatever it is. And I may have a completely different response of, wow, Derek, that's really impressive. Or really, Derek, I would have expected more. And that there's this continuous evaluative process that we're in with each other, where we're making estimates. We don't really know. And we're often stuck on our own view of like how we appraise that person's experience. But how often do we get curious about their own appraisal of, yeah, I'm really proud to have, and I'm just making this number up. This is not Derek's number in any way, listeners. $1 million in investments. I don't know. Don't really care. Not the point of the conversation. But unless I said, hey, Derek, how do you feel about having $1 million? I wouldn't actually know. Now, Derek, if you told me, Ed, I have $1 million, I might try to infer it by the tone of your voice, your body language, but I don't really know. And as we're working with folks, these are things that we're watching and monitoring a lot as financial therapists and money psychologists and financial philosophers. Derek, I don't know what to call you. You're so extraordinary. Maybe I should just call you Derek.
I go by Derek or D.
I like D. I like Derek. I'll take either of those. So Derek, as you're thinking about working with folks, I love this concept of the signaling. We're always signaling. I'm going to ask you this question of, what happens when we start to signal differently because our financial reality has shifted?
Ooh, that is an issue. That's a really good question, because my person who I learned a lot from, Dr. Ted Klutz, he talks about financial comfort zones and financial neighborhoods. And it's easy to think that there's a lower bound on our financial comfort zone. That's intuitive.
Yeah.
If I don't have this much money anymore, I'm going to feel uncomfortable. A little bit more difficult to comprehend is that there's an upper bound to this financial comfort zone. And as much as we might dream about winning the lottery or whatever it happens to be, getting that contract or getting drafted or whatever, the big payday, exactly, that one windfall or inheriting whatever, it's different rules and people treat us differently. And it's common for people, I can't say it applies to everybody, but it's common for people who move up in socioeconomic status to start to feel discomfort around, and we touched on this earlier, does this person actually like me? Or is this person here because I pay for all this, or I give them social status? Does this romantic interest actually like me? What's actually going on here? What's my family think about me? How does my family interpret the rich guy or the rich gal who, again, air quotes, because it's common to have anti-wealth beliefs, especially in people in poverty, or there's virtue in living with less. And now I'm one of them. So how do I feel about my family? There's a lot of moving parts regarding to that. So some people might, I said this in a different way earlier, we are signaling even if we don't want to signal. However I decide to dress, if I dress down to fit in with my family, say, what am I signaling to the people at that networking event that I went to with a bunch of financial planners or something? Or if I dress that in such a way that I fit in with the professionals that I'm seeing, how does my family view that social media post with me decked out in that suit or something like that, right? So even if I And then I guess in those cases, I am signaling or trying to fit in with one of those camps. But even if I just say, I like to use Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, just goes out there wearing sweatshirts and just hats. He's not signaling to anybody. Although some people call it counter signaling. Like it's just like, I don't even need to dress up because I'm so successful. So we're always signaling. And I forget where I saw this, but there used to be in college like a TV show about helping people dress better. I forget what it was called.
Oh, yeah.
There's a quote from that line or a line from that show that said, how you dress is an indication of how you expect to be treated. And that's pretty interesting. I think that applies to more than just fashion. So I haven't worked that into how this works into money yet, but I think it's still how I live. People are going to pick up on that. And just like you said, one, I don't know how much Derek has. So that's layer one.
Right.
I might take some guesses based on, and that's the level that we've been talking about. What about that guy? This is what he wears. That's what he drives. That's the gym that he goes to. But even if you told me or asked me and I said $1 million, then that's still left for you to make that judgment call. So even if you knew what was going on behind the scenes, I got this big house, but I got 2 mortgages on it, struggling. You still don't even know if that's good or bad. You only know if that's good or bad through your values. I could still say, yeah, I'm struggling down here, but I'm making it work. And I still have the nice house. Or, man, I don't know if I ever should have bought this stuff because there's no breathing room left. So I think it's just a long roundabout way to say, there's always signaling, but we're also picking up on what other people are signaling in quotes. And I don't think we do this consciously. It just happens underneath conscious awareness.
Yeah, I think that is, to me, let's go as far to say this is part of the human condition. And at least my understanding of the human condition is oriented around social belonging and connection and fitting in with our tribes or our groups of people. And so we're looking at the signals to say, do I belong? Do I not belong? And clothing is a part of belonging in community. And so it's inescapable, the reality that we're being evaluated, we are evaluating. And I think that I recently had someone share with me, because I took this concept from therapy to such an extreme of being non-judgmental, like unconditional positive regard from Carl Rogers, right? Is one of those things you get trained in as a brand new therapist. And so I've spent all these years trying to be non-judgmental and then feeling frustrated every time I see judgments and evaluations come up in my brain because they happen every single day. And I'm like, shoot, I'm not being non-judgmental. And what I heard from another podcast guest recently, they said, it's not that we're in perpetuity non-judgmental. It's that we're doing the best we can to suspend or hold judgment for a period of time so we can try to better understand what's going on. And so I think for those of us out there that are trying to live in a judgment-free zone or being non-judgmental or being radically accepting, it's okay, great. That's a great virtue way to try to live into. But the reality is our brains also have a healthy and productive side of evaluating and judging and discerning. Is it safe? Not safe? Do I belong? Do I not belong here? So we don't want to get rid of this judgmental part of our brain. We just need to use it wisely.
Yeah. And it's the old, our ancestors were all survivors. And if you go back up your ancestor list,
right,
far enough, you got people that were living in those tribes and they did have to figure out, do I belong in this tribe? If I get kicked out of this tribe, that was bad for me. I probably didn't survive to become your ancestor.
Right.
Once in the tribe, I need to know where to sit in this. So I'm hypersensitive to those glances and those facial expressions. And then what did you say? So we develop this often called negativity bias, which is I'm going to notice the bad stuff. I'm going to remember the bad stuff, spot the bad stuff. Way easier than the good stuff. That's table stakes. That's when there's a pretty cool book, Hardwiring Happiness by Rick Hansen.
Yeah.
Basically about this negativity bias and how to combat it. But he basically says our brains are like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive experiences. And I love that phrasing. And much like judgments, you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of judgments. And in my mindfulness training, that's what we learn is you can become more aware when you're judging, and then you can choose to do what you want with that judgment. But it's more of, okay, I'm making a judgment. And you can non-judgmentally notice your judgment. Or you're trying to say, all right, I see that I'm evaluating here. What does that mean? What do I do with it? It takes a lot of practice. That's the idea of mindfulness training with regard to judgments anyway.
Well, and I love you sharing that because something I hear from myself, my own internal voice, but also from many clients is like, I'm judging myself for judging. I'm shaming myself for having shame. And but I also want to come back to this, the Velcro Teflon, like negativity bias. So there's actual study of neurological structure that helps us understand this process of the negativity bias. From my understanding of the sciences, this is just not a concept that someone dreamed up. Like we can study the structure of the brain to see, oh, this is the anatomical regions of the brain that lead us to have a stronger negativity bias. So this is not just mine. This is anatomy and physiology. But I think about that as it relates to our money experiences and why it's so important to reflect on our financial wins and successes, because we're predisposed to remember all the bad financial decisions we've made, if I'm picking up on what you're saying.
That's what we do. This is when we ruminate. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done this, or why did I do that? And it's very easy for me to recall all the times I've screwed up. And if screwed up is just a judgment term too, because what does that mean to screw up? But
Right.
all the times I screwed up is when I remember. All the times I calmly solved a problem or did something that somebody else couldn't have done, or I stepped in and did something to help somebody else. I don't even remember that unless somebody else tells me, and then I dismiss it. And that's no problem. But man, that other time though, I really screwed that up. And we're hard on ourselves. That's why they call it an inner critic.
Yes. Well, and I think it's talking with another colleague very recently where they're also talking about that. I don't want to come across as prideful and arrogant, too positive. So I need to counterbalance that by making sure I remember all of the critiques, which gets framed as humility. But is it really humility, or is it this negativity bias? I don't know. There's some layers here I'm trying to tease out for myself, but also I'm doing this for you listeners. Really, no, I'm doing this for me. Like this, you know, we're trying to.
Rather like Rudy Francisco, and he's got a line in one of his poems goes something like, I take my compliments like I take my coffee. I don't drink coffee. But I think the point of that is to say, I'm really uncomfortable when people compliment me. And I think that's relatable because if you'll start to notice it, or you might start to notice that if you just compliment somebody and see how they respond to it, we have this almost, at least I can speak for myself. Why are you saying that? I'm not that. Because I remember all the bad stuff. I've got the inner critic. And when you compliment me, that's a different story from what's the one that's going on in my head. People have different relationships with compliments, but I think it's a funny line in that poem because I think it resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah, I do think so. And I think that there's a lot of different types of cultural conditioning that also teach us to not take compliments so that you don't become too prideful, too arrogant, too boastful.
Right.
And I think most of us do know those people that are so extreme on that side that's like, I don't want to be anything like that. So I'm just going to swing the pendulum all the way to the other side. And what we miss is that middle zone of like healthy self-concept, healthy acceptance of pride and accomplishment and recognition without losing sight of the value and the worth and connection of other people's contributions. So it's that word egotistical. We've got to try to figure out where are we at in this journey of understanding a healthy sense of self. I guess is what I boil it down to.
Yeah, I think so. We work with business owners and a lot of us in our circles of business owners too. And there's a tendency to feel icky about marketing for a similar reason. I know when I see when these people do it, and I feel like it gives me this ick factor, and therefore I'm not going to do that. And so therefore I don't market my services or something. And therefore the service that can be very helpful, people don't know about it because I'm not telling anybody about it. So that's when you describe that pendulum swing, it's like, we see that so often too. I grew up in this scenario, so therefore I'm going to get as far away from that as possible. But yeah, so the pendulum swing is it's doing the opposite instead of finding that Goldilocks zone.
Yes. Yeah. So I think listeners, I would invite you to just even hit the pause on this interview for a moment and just like, let this digest and figure out where am I on this pendulum of I can't allow myself to have any compliments. I reject them. too. I just soak them all up, and I'm just always looking for more. And I would just invite you to see where in the pendulum swing do you live? And if you're not in the Goldilocks zone, and this is why Derek and I want to put a number line to it. So 1 to 10, 1, like, no compliments at all, will not take them. 10, give me all the compliments. I think I'm looking for 7 to 3. Somewhere between there is probably optimal. I'm not saying 5. There's no 5. Maybe some of us live at 5, but yeah, I take compliments, but I don't know, Derek, what am I trying to get at is I don't want to be prescriptive. There's an optimal level of receiving compliments, and yet I do want an optimal. Derek, tell me the answer. What's the optimal ratio of receiving compliments? To which you say
7 to 3. That's something in the middle. So I think we're not here to talk about habits, but often you'll hear people talk about we have a base range of
yes.
happiness. And that is to say, if you've got the 7 dwarves, Grumpy is never going to be happy. But
Right.
Grumpy's range is just far lower than Happy's range. So even if Grumpy's at the top of his range, he's going to still be less happy than Happy at the lower end of his range. So I think there's also a kind of a range that we have in terms of comfort levels with praise or compliments or those kinds of things. And being more aware of that, just like most things, if we just become more aware of it, then we can respond. We can choose a mindful response to it rather than just autopilot default pick. I saw that person on social media, they're compliment fishing. That's a term that I recently learned. Oh, they're fishing for compliments. I'm not going to be that. So then, boom, I run to the other side. That's fine. But the first step is to recognize, okay, I'm doing that. Do I really want to jump all the way to the other side?
Right.
Or is there a way to still hold myself on as confident without doing the thing that I don't like, the compliment fishing, this example?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this all does happiness and everything weaves through the reality of money and how we use money, like how we spend money. Even sometimes we can buy nicer clothes to try to get compliments, to try to make ourselves more attractive. And we feel like, and maybe that first time that we present more nicely dressed than we normally do, we get a handful of compliments, which sets that feedback loop of, oh, well, so I need to dress nicely. But there can also be these diminishing returns as people acclimate to you dressing nicely, where it's like, oh, well, Ed always dresses nicely, so I don't need to compliment him regularly. And so there can be a
True.
diminishing return on, oh, that's really cool. You bought a brand new Porsche Boxster. That's so fun. Congratulations. 2 months later, no one's saying congratulations on the fact that you're driving a Porsche Boxster, right? So does that mean I need to go buy a newer, fancier car so I can get another compliment? Or do I just continue to enjoy the car for the intrinsic value it brings in my life? I'm dressing now nicely because I feel good about dressing nicely, not because I'm looking for compliments.
Yeah. And understanding the motivation. Why am I dressing nicely? And we've all got, you can even trace this back usually, I can at least for myself, to specific things, experiences, events that led to it. And becoming more aware of those is helpful. For example, my first job in the investment world, there were actually 5 partners. It was a small firm, 20 people firm. And I heard in my head, these are partners at an investment firm. So they're going to be all rich, hoity-toity types. This is the story that I bring to this table.
Right.
And very specifically, I remember one partner gets there. Another partner says, hey, nice tie. They happen to be wearing the same tie. And he says, oh, thanks. I bet you paid more for yours. No, there's no way I paid more for it. So they were arguing over who paid less for their clothes. And that just shattered my preconception about these people are going to be bragging about how expensive my clothes. The opposite. They were bragging over how little they paid for their clothes. And that just changed my perception of, that's really interesting. They're not showing off. Well, they're not showing off how expensive my clothes are. You can make a case that they're showing off how good I am at bargain hunting or something like that.
Right.
But it just changed my perception, and that still stays with me. I'm aware of that story, that message now, but that stays, it's there. It stays with you.
When I think I love Dr. James Grubman's work, Strangers in Paradise, around this journey into the land of wealth. And for those of us that don't grow up in wealth or around wealth per se, we have all these ideas about what it's going to be like to be around wealthy people and to interact with them. And I can remember one of my, like the anxiety that I felt when I was working at Vanguard Mutual Funds and I started out in client service, and the average account was like $10,000, $20,000, 50,000. That was not a lot of money now in the grand scheme of things. But I knew about this flagship department. Oh, what's that? Well, that's the people that have $1 million or more at Vanguard in investments. I was like, oh man, those people are important. That's going to be a big deal, talking to millionaires, because I hadn't before then ever knowingly been talking to millionaires. Now I'm sure I had, but it was like in your face. You cannot see it because you see their accounts. And I can remember that first couple of days, like leading up to it, and then being there, like, well, these people are going to judge me. They're going to find out. They didn't give two clips about who I was or anything. They just wanted to make sure that I could answer their question accurately and do the thing that needed to be done. And what I found is they're actually mostly pretty nice people. And it's this bias that like most wealthy people or all wealthy people are jerks or rude or short or all these kind of negative descriptors. And it burst my bubble about wealthy people are mostly by and large pretty nice, thoughtful, professional, courteous, and just want to have their business taken care of. They're not
Exactly.
they're not calling in to judge Ed about what he's doing or not doing. They don't care. So yeah, we can get so in our head about what we think wealthy people are like, but when you actually spend time with them, man, it can be a really different experience.
That's the thing that changes. Like many people growing up with meager means, it's easy to say rich people are insert the blank. And then all your bosses aren't like that. And then all the clients. And in fact, they're often generous and they're giving. And wait a second, we're all bad people. They must be somewhere.
We have them all in a closet over here, Ed. We keep them in the closet. Just kidding. But yeah, Derek, this is a whole nother avenue of conversation. So I'm going to restrain myself as I'm monitoring our time of conversation and just invite listeners at this point in the conversation is take a minute to reflect and think about this whole big arc that I hope what you've heard is like Derek and Ed are two guys who have been on their own journey of trying to sort out what it means to have a relationship with money. We care deeply about helping people have a safe place to think and reflect on that. And in light of that, Derek, if people have been listening to you and saying, I really like Derek and the way he frames things, how do they find you? How do they connect with you?
Easiest way is to go to meeting.blog. That's where I do most of my work. I draw a lot of pictures, and if you're a social media person, you can find all the links there. I'm not super active on social media, but I do parse out my weekly newsletter on account of social media, but meeting.blog is the home base.
That's awesome. We'll have that in the show notes as well. So just scroll down on your phone or at your computer to see that and go check out some of Derek's work. He has incredible visual graphics that will probe your mind to think about these things in a way different than hearing the conversation. And I'm a big fan of, we need to take in information and concepts in mixed media. So we need to listen, we need to read, but we also need to see graphic images. And Derek has incredible graphic images to help you work through these concepts as well. So I highly encourage you to go check out his work. Derek, as always, thank you for your generosity and kindness. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Same. Thanks for having me.
I invite you now to stop for 5 or 10 minutes and reflect on what you just heard. Maybe even journal about it. Give yourself the time to consider what you just heard and what it means to you. By giving yourself the time to reflect and integrate what you just heard, it will help you along your journey of learning, healing, and growing towards financial intimacy in your life. Please like and follow this podcast and share with someone that would benefit from being on the journey of financial intimacy. Wishing you healthy love and money, Ed.